Welcome to a new episode of Cool Girls Create. I'm your host, T. Westbrook, and I am here with, I'm going to say, not just a dope chick, but she's like a big sister to me, the doctor, okay? Dr. Contrecia Tharpe. Welcome to the Cool Girls Create podcast.
Thank you. Super excited to be here. Super excited to see what we dive into.
Yes. All right. So before we dive into all the things that I know our listeners or people who are watching are going to want to know, which is, how to be successful as a creator and a business owner. Let's start with your story. So recently you just did your first TED Talk.
I did.
So, I think that's a good place to start. So how did you end up in this place to do a TED Talk? What was the journey to get there?
So about a year ago, I was invited to a networking event. And people who know me know that networking is kind of one of my kryptonites. Like it makes me shut down. I start sweating, I get hot. And I walked into this particular room, and one of the anecdotes that I have when networking is that I'll go into a room, I'll find me a comfortable place. If there's food, I'll eat. If there's a drink, I'll get something to drink, and I just sit down and collect my thoughts. And what I didn't learn until afterwards is that a lot of people take that as being like the cool kid, like, oh, she's so confident. She's coming in and and I'm like, y'all don't understand that I'm over there battling in my mind, like, which conversation do I double dutch into? And at this event, Leah Hayes, who I love dearly, but Leah Hayes was like, there's someone that I need you to meet. And at that event, it was a lady named Amanda Banks. And we just like instantly clicked. She was in sports. My agency has a sports division. And we just started talking and found out that we were both, graduated from high school here in Nashville. We both were high school athletes. We both still follow sports. We love sports. We want to do NIL programs. And we just developed this friendship. And then in her words, as she grew to know me, she saw that I had a passion for things outside of my industry. And she gave a TED Talk about 2 years ago and went in for a license. And she asked me to apply, and the committee selected my TED Talk. And it was primarily because a lot of people expected me to talk about marketing or branding or storytelling or something like that. And I went in completely opposite of that and started talking about experiences with equity and inclusion and for returning citizens. And so we started the process in March, and the TED Talk was in April. And I can tell you, a lot of people will make it seem like, oh, it's just a TED Talk. There's no such thing as just a TED Talk. That was the most stressful 4 months of my life because you're overthinking everything constantly. And then there's no script. Everything gets really memorized. And you get up there, and I tell people all the time, like, I forgot, I think, probably like 30% of my speech. And it was like, that was the theme. A lot of people were like, I didn't even quote this statistic, or I forgot this altogether. So that was the journey to TED Talk. It was completely a God thing. He connected me in a way that my weakness what I viewed as a weakness of myself elevated me and put me in a place, in a perspective from another person that made it seem like, oh, she has it all together. Oh, I want to be just like her. I need to follow her journey. So kudos to God.
Yeah, kudos to God. So there were a couple of themes that stood out to me when you were talking about your journey there. So, just being in the space of like so I guess I'm a reformed introvert, or I don't know, extroverted introvert, whatever. But
Yeah.
you talked about being, in those spaces where you have to meet new people or join new conversations. And there's a type of pressure that comes with that as, someone who is an entrepreneur or a creator, because a part of the success that you have comes from building relationships. And networking. So I think it's amazing that not only did you take that situation and turning into something positive, but a TED Talk came from it.
TED Talk.
Yeah. So So let's talk a little bit about your background. So you
Okay.
mentioned, going to high school
Mhm.
in Nashville, and you mentioned a little bit about your background, but let's talk about that more. So um who was little Dr. Tracy?
They called me Tracy Reese. She was an adventurous and like she was a creative all in her own sense. Like no was not an option. Um, if there was something that she wanted to learn, she was going to learn how to do it. And she was just a go-getter. She was really, really adventurous. She was imaginative. She was an amazing little girl. And I think that I'm just now starting to get back to the root of who she was. But she was also somebody though that really valued the appeasement of everyone around her. She wanted to make sure that everybody around her was okay and was happy and that she didn't let anybody down. And so she lived up to expectations that should have never been set for her. And so, around after my high school, after I graduated high school, I went to University of Memphis and I studied architecture. And I studied architecture, but I was also double majoring in microbiology and biochemistry because the expectation was that, okay, well, you should be a doctor. But what I really wanted for myself was architecture. And so I was studying architecture, got pregnant very, very young. I got pregnant at 20, dropped out of college and moved back to Middle Tennessee. And for a long time, at that point, I was doing makeup professionally. I became assigned makeup artist to an agency that repped me. So I did book covers and magazines and tours and shows and things like that. But I just was never happy. It was something that I was good at, but it was never something I was passionate about. It was a means to an end because I was a single parent. And
Mm.
it was just, I remember like my son used to go and do makeup with me, because it was just us, right? I had my parents, but it was really just us. And so there was just one day where I was like, this is not it. There's so much more for me. How do I get to it? And so always on set and always on tours and always with like the larger projects that you did, you saw publicists on the site. And so I was like, okay, started talking to them and was like, so how do you do what you do? What was schooling looking like for you? At this point, I had not even thought about going back to school because it seemed so far-fetched. And one day I just re-enrolled and I re-enrolled at MTSU and graduated. And then at the same time, transitioned my business from makeup to public relations, and then from public relations and image consulting. And then from that, we added marketing and became an INC agency. And we went in 2008, 2009 is when we started. 2012 is when I quit my corporate America job and went full time with this.
Wait, because we're gonna talk about that.
I gotta die to get through all
Yeah,
of
so okay. So when you were in college, you said you went to school for architecture, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you graduated, you became a parent,
Mm-hmm.
and you were doing your makeup thing, and then you got the courage, right, to go back to school because you were
I
like,
never graduated. I didn't graduate the
oh,
first time.
you didn't
I
graduate.
never graduated the first time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
So,
never graduated.
wow. So got pregnant, was
Dropped
doing the
out.
makeup thing, dropped out. Now look, now see, everybody talk about college, but they don't talk about the that happens, right? So for
And
you,
life happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
you became a parent.
Yeah.
When I got to school, I came in with like scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
financial aid, all the things, and
Mm-hmm.
then I just fell off and started failing. So I lost my scholarships,
Mm-hmm.
and TSU kicked me out. So I had
Yeah.
to go get a real job, go to a state college,
Mm-hmm.
Nashville State, to get my
Mm-hmm.
credits to get back into
Back
school,
entity issue.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I could finish. So
Yeah.
I could definitely relate to like just
Yeah.
perseverance. That's just perseverance, you
It
know?
is. And it's one of the things too that I tell people, because a lot of people see Dr. Contrecia Tharpe, but they don't see what she went through to become that. Um, like they see like, oh, your son is doing amazing. They don't realize like I'm a single parent and have been for 17 years. They don't see like and for so long I felt ashamed in that story. Like
Mm.
I felt the shame, like, okay, I went to college and didn't finish and I had to drop out. That was a shame point for me. And it's one of those things, like you said, it's everybody has a journey, everybody has a story. And if I can't find pride in mine to share it, then I went through it for nothing.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I dropped out. I had to. I didn't have a choice. My dad, when I found out I was pregnant, my dad called me. He said, "Okay, so we finishing out this semester and you moving back." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." And he was like, "So
What's the
tell me
plan?
about how you're gonna do it. Like tell me how you're going, because architecture is like a full-time job. I went to class from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night." And so my dad was like, "Okay, so tell me how you're going to raise a child like that." And I was like, but, and he was like, "Exactly. So you're moving back." And I was like, yes.
So
And yeah,
so you enrolled, wait, so you moved back with your,
my
your
son.
parents,
Mm-hmm.
and then you decided that you were gonna go back. So how much time was that after you like went back and then decided to re-enroll?
About 4 years.
Okay.
My son was in like kindergarten. On his fall breaks, he would go to class with me.
Right. So during this 4-year time frame, you're doing your makeup thing and you're like, okay, this is cool, but there has to be more. So you decided to go back to school to finish,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Mm-hmm.
switched your major
Completely.
from architecture to
Yes, I have
public
my
relations.
bachelor's is in marketing and communications, and then I have a minor in entrepreneurship and corporate management. So during that 4 year period, I was um, during that 4 year period, I was working a corporate American job. I was working for a local university in their finance department. I was doing makeup every night, most weekends, and I was a single parent and trying to figure out like how to make it all balance. And then I was not going to quit. I'll say this: I was not going to quit corporate America. But what I can say is that when you pray continuously for something and God gives you the signs that He's answered your prayers and you just keep ignoring them, then He'll force your hand. So it's easy. I tell people all the time, and that's something that I talk about, is you can learn the lesson the easy way when God gives you that chance to learn it easy. Or if you're going to keep learning it, then He's going to be like, okay. So I was trying to give you a little one question pop quiz, open book test, but you trying to make this an SAT. So let's go with the SAT, make it hard. And so he made it very, very hard. That final lesson I learned, and I ended up walking away from corporate America, and I haven't worked in corporate America since.
I know that's right. And this is a similar story. I think that's why we connected
Mm-hmm.
the way we did so quickly. But same thing, I quit my job as well, and I had to learn the hard way. And it's been 5 years for me,
Mm-hmm.
but this is like the perfect segue to talk about that transition from
Mm-hmm.
corporate America into being your own boss. Like, let's skip all the fluff. What do you think the biggest misconception is about being your own boss? Because you are a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
you have your agency, you're a parent, right? And a lot of people don't talk about this as entrepreneurs, but the volunteer work and the giving back to your community, that is also, another hat.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the biggest misconception that you think people have about being your own boss?
That is easy. I think that social media, social media has really ruined the journey of entrepreneurship, and the joy in it, right? So because you're force fed all of these fluff stories and the highs every day, that when you actually start and it's tough, or you start and one day you have 100 orders, or you have a great client that you signed day one, but the next day that client's gone, the orders are at zero, and you're trying to figure out what kind of ramen you want, right? Like
Period.
they don't talk about that. Like the
Don't sleep
you
on the ramen now.
listen, don't sleep. But it was one of those, I tell people all the time, when I first started and I was a full-time entrepreneur, my son's school fell just outside of the 1 mile mark from our house, meaning that he couldn't ride the bus unless I walked him to a bus stop that was closer to. And there were times where I couldn't even afford, it was like, okay, so are we going to eat? Or am I going to have the money to put gas in my car to make him the 1.25 mile
Mm-hmm.
drive to school? And so it's those kind of stories that you don't hear. We're only fed the highs. And I think COVID really, really did a lot of entrepreneurs a disadvantage as well, because we were force fed this content that you can start an LLC to get a G-Wagon. Right.
Right.
And that was the concept. But it's one of those, I tell people all the time, entrepreneurship is one of the best, worst decisions I ever made in my life.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it, because I try to describe it to people. It's like a
yeah,
love-hate relationship. It's like
yeah.
that cousin that you love but you can't stand, but it's like,
And
you know,
I see you once a year. I see you at Thanksgiving. It's that cousin, right? Like we don't have to talk throughout the year. I'll see you at the holidays. If something happens, I'll catch up with you on Facebook.
period.
It's that cousin, right? It's just, I tell people all that this is the best, worst decision I've ever made in my life. I take extreme pride in being an entrepreneur. My father now, where he was traditional and entrepreneurship to him was the craziest thing ever, he's now come around and he's super proud of everything that I've accomplished. But there are times where I'm like, still, like, what are we doing? Because there's the comfort level that you find, and it's not for everybody. I think that that's another thing that needs to be talked about, is that in order to be a boss in today's society, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. For some people, 9 to 5 is where you should be, and that is fine. Like that's a structure, and that's a consistency, and that's a comfort, and that's a safe place, that because social media makes it seem that everybody should be a boss and be a girl boss and be a CEO. And okay, Chad, but let's talk about how these gray hairs are hairing. Life is definitely lifing. And every day is not rainbows and sunshines. And so you're gonna get started, and you'll realize that just because your grandmama and them say it was hot doesn't mean that the demographic is going to catch on. Just because it's something that you want to put out in social media doesn't mean that you'll get the followers. You'll see people who you're like, how are you getting the following and the likes and all of this stuff? Like, entrepreneurship also, if you don't manage it correctly, will force you to compare yourself to people that you don't even, that's never supposed to be. You're never meant to compare.
You're not even in the same boat. Look, that you just walked straight into the segue that I wanted to talk about, because it's like the dark side of being your own boss, the dark side of being an entrepreneur. And I'm going to be real vulnerable and talk about this, because this is something that I literally struggle with, and I feel like I'm coming out of it. But it's like, you don't. So I was telling my husband, Greg, that somehow I slipped into being a consumer on social media versus just solely a creator. So I was going to social media to kind of detach from the worries and the stress of being a business owner, right? But then what happens is that stuff starts to creep into your mindset. So it's not like I'm comparing myself to other people, like, why you got this and I don't have that, but it's more so like, are you working hard enough? Are you doing enough? Why is this working for them and it's not working for you? Have you accomplished enough? All these different things that just start to like weigh you down and make you feel hopeless, right? And nobody talks about that. So can you relate to that feeling of trying to stay on top of the curve when it comes to not comparing yourself and being too hard on yourself as a business owner?
It is, and it's one of the things that I realized I said, because of how I was raised and because there were always expectations placed there, then I continue to put expectations on myself as an entrepreneur, as a person, as a woman, as a mother, that were unrealistic, should not have been there. And because of that, like you said, you get to this place where you consume social media instead of just engaging with it for the purpose that you have for it. And you start to see things and you start to consume things. And of course, what we think and what we see and what we speak, we become, right? And so what my challenge was that I can do social media for everybody else. I can give anybody a social media strategy. I can post, I can come up with great captions, I can come up with dope content ideas. But for me, by the end of the day, I'm like, I devalued what I knew, what my superpower was, because it was so easy for me. It was like, okay, well, they would never get it. The content would never work. I don't need to post it. And
Mm-hmm.
it would be like 2 or 3 months later, and I'll see that same piece of content on someone else's page. And I'm like, and it's doing well.
Right.
And I'm like, Tracy, like, yo, what are you doing to yourself? And it just became one of those things where the self-talk that I had with myself had to change. And that's a difficult conversation, right? Is that because your worst critic is you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes your biggest op is yourself.
Sometimes
And
I really think that we are our biggest obstacle, like
we
period,
are.
in life.
We are. And it's that self-loathing, negative talk that we do to ourselves subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not being in a room. My thing, if I wasn't in a room, what used to be was that my mom would tell me, well, you didn't deserve to be in a room. Instead of, girl, that just wasn't the room for you. Your room is coming. And so I had to change how I talked to myself. I had to change my perception of, one, what was my value, what was my definition of success. Two, I tell people all the time now, like, this is the first time in a long time. This is the first time in about 3.5 years that I can close my eyes and vividly visualize me walking into every room, every situation on stage. My agency's doing well, and I can see myself in that moment. I can see what I look like. I can see what I'm talking about. I can see the audience's reaction, and that's what keeps me going. And
Ooh,
that's the part that people don't talk about, is outside of just wanting it, because we all want success, whatever that is for each, like, we all
right.
define that.
They
But
say if you could just say it and manifest it, everybody will have it.
listen, that's it. But can you really visualize yourself, and then that vision of that version of yourself, what does that take? That's what you need to be working on. Because a lot of times people just like, okay, well, I posted on social media 5 times this week and I only got 12 likes on each post. It's not working. Okay, but where's the consistency? Where's your plan? It's
Mm-hmm.
not an overnight thing. The things that we are seeing people manifest, the viral, the growing, the success, is a journey that they have either chosen to disclose or not. But it took some time to get there. And I think that's the darkest side of entrepreneurship, is that journey to get there is never talked about. You'll see people talk about it or like joke about it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, child.
It's like an inside joke, right?
Yeah. It's
Like
like,
we got
oh,
people
Lord.
that's like, yeah, they got their side hustle, or they're like, yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be an entrepreneur. And then us over here who've been doing it for a while, we like,
All right,
yeah,
child.
come on over here.
Yeah, do
So,
it. If this is what you think you want. Yeah. That's one of those.
so uh I really there of course there are so many things that you touched on that I think is important. So
Mhm.
the biggest thing, like if you're listening or watching this, a lot of people talk about mindset, right? And mindset, but people don't really go into the details of what that means. And I think you hit the hammer on the head when you said, like, you have to change the way that you speak to yourself. And
Mhm.
uh instead of being your worst critic, become your best advocate. Like
The
visual,
biggest cheerleader.
that's a skill set to
Mhm.
visualize yourself being successful, doing the thing.
Mhm.
And so I just want to, reiterate that because that's so important. Now, I want to switch gears because the one thing that we connect on, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, but they don't really understand, is marketing. And I
Mhm.
want to take it a step further and talk about self-promotion, because I think that, we could get into the weeds of what works with marketing for business owners,
Mhm.
but there's a huge like roadblock when it comes to understanding promotion or self-promotion, and I want us to touch on that. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on what it took for you to learn how to promote not only your businesses, but yourself as a brand?
I had to get outside of the idea and the notion that promotion of self is egotistical or arrogant. I think, and that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people like when they meet me or they talk, they're like, girl, you do all that. You don't like, why do people not know? And it was like, okay, because I don't want to come across as like, oh, she thinks she's all that. Because
Like
I've had
that
that.
girl.
Yeah, and I've had people approach me and like tell me that, like, well, just because you're a doctorate or just because you have a degree. And I'm like at first they used to make me feel some kind of way because I would be like, what about me makes you think that that's what any of that is for? But I had to get outside of that mindset that promotion of the positive things that I have going on is arrogant, right? And I think that Deion Sanders, when he says, "Don't let my confidence," what is that? It's something like, "Don't let my confidence make you uncomfortable," or something like that. Like, it's not my problem that who I am is a problem for you.
Ooh.
And so, that was the biggest thing because I spent and I always have, as an agency owner, as a marketer, as a creator, as a publicist, we spend our days making sure that our clients look their best self, that the best version of them is put out on social media. And so much so that we'll see some of our clients and we're like, man, they look good. Or like, yes, it's finally catching on. People are starting to finally see. But when it's time to turn that around and do that for ourselves, we struggle because it's that one thing where a lot of us are not arrogant, a lot of us are not selfish, a lot of us are not egotistical. And so I had to get away from that me broadcasting or sharing my experiences, my highs, and even my lows didn't make me an arrogant person. And so it started out small and I still struggle with it. I'm not as consistent on social media as I should be, especially this far into my career. And with the things that I have accomplished. But what I am starting to see is that people are more receptive to it because I've taken the plight, like, we're about to be transparent. I'm not tone switching. I'm not code switching. I might slip up and curse, and I'm sorry, but that's who Tracy is. And I realize that the more I do that, the more receptive people are. And then I think now I'm more comfortable because it's not forced. And before I felt like it was forced. It had to look a certain way, it had to sound a certain way, it had to feel a certain way. And as soon as I removed that layer of not being transparent, not being authentic, and not showing up as Tracy would show up, then it's like, okay, well, this is more comfortable because I can get in front of a camera and I can talk and not have to worry about if my voice is accurate or if I'm going to use the big words or are people going to take me professional or not. Girl, bye. Like, this is who
Right.
it is. You see,
Do I need
like,
to wear this? Do I need to wear my hair like this or talk like
yeah,
this? Do I need to have a script? You just need
yeah.
to show up.
I just need to
Okay.
show up. And that's the thing too, is that we have to get to a place where progress is better than perfection.
Ooh.
Because if we are a creator, if you are an entrepreneur, your business, the things that you put out are like your babies. And we only want the best for our babies, right? And so because of that, then we will overthink the process of release because it has to look like, no, okay, well, that shade of blue is not the shade of blue. So I'm gonna spend the next 12 weeks looking for the perfect shade of blue when I could have just put this out and I can make changes. Like, you can always change
Mm-hmm.
anything, but it's better to have something out there that people can see instead of holding on to it. And then you're looking at 5 years from now and you still have it in your notebook on your desk. It's
And
just,
constantly feeding that cycle of self-loathing. Like,
mhm.
now I done seen all these people do what I didn't. I thought about that
That
five
was my
years ago.
course 10 years ago.
I did that already. Look,
That was my course 10 years. Here's the course outline and the modules and the outcomes
right.
and the takeaways and it's
Yeah.
just still sitting in my book because, and that's something too that I think, and this might be way too deep, but I apologize ahead of time. But I think
Girl,
that that's
please.
something too that minorities, more specifically, Black men and women as business owners, because we have always had to show up as more than, or as double than, or as triple than, we are so self-conscious
Mm.
we're more self-aware of the things that we put out in the world because we don't want it to be perceived as anything other than what we intended for it to be. And that only limits us. Now, there's some of us who just like, I don't care, put it out. But
Not
that
me,
takes,
girl.
that's me. That's not me either. But I'm getting to the point where I see constituents and associates of different ethnicities and races, and they just put it out and like, if it catches, it catches. If not, I'll learn the lesson. And I'm
Well, yeah, I think, and not to cut you off, but I do
yeah.
want to get, because I want to be mindful of the time. That made me think of the biggest lesson that I've learned. So while I'm talking about this, I want you to think about the biggest lessons that you've learned, especially when it comes to like PR and, promoting your business as someone who owns an agency. But I would say, like you said, focusing on progress versus perfection. But the other thing that you were talking about is like, if I show up as me, there is no bad version of that, right? So for me, I used to have so much trouble trying to figure out what to post. Well, what if my audience doesn't like this, or they like that, or this or that, and you just dig yourself into a hole. And I find that I have more clarity because I release those shackles of like what you were saying, of putting the pressure on myself to be perfect. It's like, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm going to go for. And I feel like as a Black woman, that is a struggle because we were, well, maybe it's generational too, but I was taught that I had to show up like prim, proper, polished, and to see other, like, our other constituents just kind of get out there and go for it. It's like the one thing that I've learned is you need to experiment. And you can't experiment and you can't be great if you're not willing to try or to start.
And
So,
greatness is something that evolves over time. Greatness is not something that is just birth. It takes process. But and even with you, I can see, I can say that I've seen the growth, because I remember like when we first met and we were going to a meeting and you had on a jacket, a colorful jacket. And I remember you walking up to me, you said, "Do you think it's okay for me to wear this in this room?" And I was like, "Girl," because by that point that we had met, I think Tracy had definitely became like Dr. T, like Tracy T or whatever. Like I had just become like, this is me. So
yeah.
much so like, I go to meetings in Jordans and who is you? What you gonna do? Right. But I remember you coming up to me and you was like, do you think I can wear this jacket in this room? Do you think that it's too much? And I said, it's you. Like that's you. I said, man, own it. And you walked into the room and you owned it and you got so many compliments on that jacket. And you were like, and he's like, I was overthinking it. But to see where you've come, and now I see you walk in a room and I'm like, there she go.
Period.
There she is.
See, that's what I'm saying. I need that big. Everybody needs them a Dr. T. Everybody needs them a Tracy. My big sister. Look, like you said, y'all go get y'all one. This one is mine. I'm sharing her for the podcast.
That's what I put on there. Everybody need a tea. And they're like, but get you another tea because this tea is mine. Sorry.
Period.
We're not sharing. We're not sharing.
Man.
But yeah, I think that's
Thank
the
you for that.
Yeah, that's because I remember that. And I can tell you the jacket that it is. I like, because you were like, is this too much in this room? Like, you think? And I was like, girl, what they gonna say?
Because coming from not only how we were, groomed, but I came from corporate America. So in corporate America, I was the token Black girl,
Yeah.
They were watching me like a hawk. And so
Always.
I really I
Always.
really had to like struggle and go through that and figure out who I was in like this world. So it can be difficult to do that. Okay, so we down to the last few minutes.
Okay.
So let's talk about some marketing.
Okay.
This is what I want you to do. I want you to tell me the top 3 mistakes that you feel like people make when it comes to marketing. Like, I want some real nitty gritty facts.
Okay. Nitty gritty. Okay. Number
real.
1, I think a lot of people write content and plan content based on what they feel that the audience needs to hear instead of what the audience wants to hear. And so you have to make sure that you understand. That's one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't do is study who your demographic is and what are their pain points, and then how do you provide that solution, and focus your content there, and make sure your content is not all promotion, promotion, promotion. It needs to be like a good mix of education, fun, tips, tricks, and then promotion in that. Like establish yourself as the authority with the knowledge, and then from there the promotion will just happen. So that's number one. Number two, consistency. This is something that I still struggle with myself. But just because your content does not perform well or as well as you think that it should when you first put it out, keep going, keep posting. They were saying like there's some people who put out like 10 pieces of content a day. That's a lot, right? Especially for somebody who is struggling to put out one piece of content a month. So, but keep the consistency going. And the thing that was kind of like the aha moment for me was I put out a reel, and I thought the reel was going to go crazy. And I think I got like 110 views, like 110 likes. And I was like, that's not what it was supposed to do. But then it was like the realization, like, okay, well, Tracy, imagine doing that in person in front of 110 people. And that shifts the perspective, right? Like, yeah, of course, we would like to see like 23.4K views
Right.
or likes, but just imagine, even if it's 30 people, right? Imagine you doing whatever you were doing in that piece of content in front of 30 people, and it shifts the perspective. Like, okay, well, maybe even though it's not what I thought it was going to be, it still performed well enough, because if this was happening in real time and in real life, then that would have been super successful for me. And number three, I think the biggest thing that they do is they try to be everything to everyone across all platforms. And so you need to find a platform and maximize your presence there if that's where your audience is. Just because you think that the content is fun and cool on TikTok or Instagram might not mean that that's where your audience is. Like if you do business to business interactions, you really need to be on LinkedIn, because I can't tell you any procurement department that's looking on Instagram or TikTok to find their next vendor. And so make sure that you understand who it is that you're wanting to purchase or engage or interact with your brand, and meet them where they are instead of expecting them to find you and interact with you where you are. So that would be my top three, would be writing copy, content captions for your audience and what they need instead of what you want them to know. Number two would be consistency. And number three is make sure that you're maximizing the platform that is best suited for your audience.
Those are some great tips.
Never
And
straight off the dome like a rapper.
yeah, like seriously, y'all. So like I would say if you start there, just reinforcing those three things, like consistency, I think is the most important out of what you said, because you have to show up, and you have to show up regardless of if you getting people clapping for you, which is the likes or the shares.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the only thing that I would add to that is take it slow. Like what you were saying, like find that don't the goal is to produce, like you said, 10 pieces of content a day. But if you're struggling to produce one piece of content, then you need to start with that. Show up every day,
At your
right, for
time.
yourself with that one piece of content, and start there and then build on top of that. I see
Yeah.
a lot of people like stretch themselves thin, and I've even been guilty of that. And then the last thing is you can create 10 pieces of content in one day and share it across platforms, but it's still just one video, or one video with text, or now you've turned the video into, a meme or something like that. So you can repurpose content. You just have to think outside the box and be creative. And I think that is one of the biggest hangups that I've even struggled with, is like, I just stopped thinking outside the box
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think if people kept that creativity going, that creative thinking going, it would be a lot easier to be consistent with content.
I agree. And I think too that what you touched on is really something that a lot of people need to hear too, is just the frequency. So inconsistency, if it is that you can only post once a month, right? Make sure that that once a month is to be expected, and your audience knows like, okay, it's Tuesday. the 31st, like this, the fourth Tuesday, I know that such and such is going to have this content, but make sure you give yourself a frequency and a cadence that you can keep up with yourself if you are managing your own marketing and implementation of strategy and things like that. So that way you're not overwhelming yourself, because we are told that it needs to be this many pieces of content at these times during these days. Then it can become overwhelming, especially like you said, if you are struggling to even produce the one piece. But make sure that you are creating a frequency and a cadence that you can keep up with, and then over time, as you start to see that that is being engaged with, then increase it with something else that you can do. But that consistency is only to be with what you can manage if you are managing it yourself. Because if not, you will set yourself up for the okie doke and be like, Lord, I
Yep,
said,
and be trying to hire people like you, talking about do my marketing for me.
listen, Lord, please
Yeah.
help me.
All right. So, I would like for you, Dr. T, to close us out with just a beacon of inspiration for the women creators and entrepreneurs that are listening to this episode. What's one thing that you want to leave in their spirit?
That you're enough and that what you do matters. Never define your purpose or the things that you're wanting to achieve for yourself based on what society tells you you need to be doing. Like, you know what you have a passion for, you know what your purpose is, and walk in it every day. What you got, like you already have all the tools necessary in order to make some things happen. So just get out there and do it.
I know that's right. And is there anything that you want to share with our audience about any upcoming projects, um, products, anything that you have coming up?
So we are relaunching Favon Creative. We have Favon Creative, which is just our basic IMC services, but then we also have Favon Sports and Favon Digital. Sports, of course, we work with collegiate and professional athletes. Digital is where we work with influencers and content creators to make sure that they are being maximized and getting some brands. And then we are also looking to launch a community for marketing and PR professionals called Alchemy. So it's ALCOMMY, and it's just a play on the actual word of alchemy and that definition. But we're looking to be more intentional about making sure that freelancers and agency owners and entrepreneurs in this field know who their partners and friends are, so that way we're able to network and build stronger connections and go after these larger projects, because we have the capacity and the capabilities to do it too. And so yeah, the goal is to have a conference in a year. So November 2024 is our first alchemy conference. So be sure to look for that. We're planning a calendar to come to major cities. So Austin, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Miami, Nashville, Louisville, Chicago, New York. We're going to start this way and then branch out west. We're going to take care of the East Coast first, the East and the South.
Just take over. You feel me?
We're trying. And the app. So y'all be seeing something. Make sure you follow me on social media. November 1st, we are pushing out information about the app that is coming, that is meant for marketing, PR professionals, as well as DIY entrepreneurs. So people who need to understand their metrics and need help with content and things like that. We got something coming for you that will be amazing for you to utilize. So yeah, just stay tuned to social media, man. I'm gonna get consistent and show y'all what I'm doing.
I know that's right. We are gonna get consistent. That's the
Consistent.
word of the rest for the rest of the year. Consistent.
That's the word for the rest of the decade, Lord.
I know, right? All right. So thank y'all for tuning in with me and my wonderful guest, Dr. Contrecia Tharpe. Until next time, TNT signing.
TNT. Kaboom, right? TNT.
All right.